this month. Well, I guess it's late in the month, but this is our November version of this event. And I'm incredibly privileged to announce, I will allow Andre to introduce our guest. Andre Dua is a senior partner and the managing partner of McKinsey's Miami office. He will introduce Eric Woolworth, and then I'll come back and participate in the conversation, which is really going to be just a conversation. And at the end, we'll be very happy to take questions from all of you.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. How's everyone?
Great.
Excellent. So I was watching the game last night.
Oh, come on. That's the one topic I was hoping we'd avoid.
Well, so I'm originally from Brooklyn. And I was a season ticket holder of the Nets when they moved from New Jersey to Brooklyn. And I had a great time there, and I got to see mismanagement up close. And last year during the playoff run, I decided it was time to join Heat Nation. So when I was watching the end of the game last night, I realized that my heart was beating for the Heat. So I've been turned
Didn't do us any good.
didn't help. So look, we're super excited to be having this speaker series. As you know, the reason for this, for those of you who've come to some of these before, is we think there are an enormous number of very interesting, high-talent leaders in Florida, and in particular in Miami. And our goal is to bring those leaders to you and talk a little bit with them about how they think about leadership. And to see what lessons we can learn from them. So the goal of this is to spotlight leaders in Florida, because I think there's a real opportunity to do that. As you all know, Florida's now fourth largest economy in the country, extremely dynamic, and therefore has a number of great leaders. So I'm excited to be sitting here today with Eric Woolworth, who's the president of the Heat Group. First, a little bit about the Heat. As you know, I'm just learning this. Does anyone know when the Heat was formed? Yes, 1988. All right, how many years have they made the playoffs in 35 seasons? Guess anyone? 24 times out of 35 seasons. How many division titles? 16. 7 conference titles, and how many NBA titles? Right, in 2006, 12, and 13.
I should have won one of my rings. I forgot.
Yeah, you should have won one of your rings. So Eric has been with the Heat. This is your 29th season?
This.
Right. You've been the president of business operations for 24 of those years, in which time you've done some incredible things. The Heat is extremely highly regarded. It's really regarded as having a real focus on customer service. It is a sales machine. No amount of friendship with Eric has enabled me to get season tickets. And the Heat is really regarded as among the elite in the sports and entertainment industry. So maybe with that, can you join me in welcoming Eric today?
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So I'm going to start off with a question really about Eric's personal journey to the Heat. You're a lawyer. You joined the Heat 29 years ago as legal counsel after the Heat were acquired by Carnival owner Mickey Arison. How did you make the jump from, well, maybe tell us a little bit about being legal counsel for the Heat, but how did you make the jump from legal into CEO of the organization?
Joining the Heat was, I didn't have this plan, right? There was no, I was innocently minding my own business, practicing law in Washington, D.C., mostly environmental law, actually. And I had met my wife literally the first day of law school. We'd gotten married during our 3rd year, and she's from Miami. And around the time that we'd started dating, her dad, who was a partner at Price Waterhouse, was lured away by Mickey Arison to become the CFO of Carnival Cruise Lines. And Mickey had just taken over Carnival from his dad, Ted. And I think they had 12 ships or 14 ships or something like that. And now they have, I don't know, close to 200 ships on the water. So Mickey really grew that business. And my father-in-law, Howard Frank, ended up being his right-hand man, the COO and vice chair at Carnival for many years. So Mickey was at my wedding in 1991. And right sometime in the early 90s, my father-in-law started giving me a hard time about moving to Miami, which I didn't want to do. You know, it was my wife's territory, and you know, we had a nice life in Washington. And he was bugging me on a regular basis about moving to Miami, and I was having a hard time figuring out how to get him to stop. And he was up visiting us in the fall of '94. My wife was out of the house, and I remember this like it was yesterday. Sat me down, and he said, "Okay, let's have a serious conversation about what it's going to take to bring you to Miami." And I'm like, I don't want to have this serious conversation. Like, how do I get myself out of this, like, for good? And so I just, like, off the cuff said, you know, Howard, the one thing that I might come to Miami for is a job in sports. I've always enjoyed sports. I played sports through college, and you know, that would be something that would be really exciting. And he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, okay." Like that was the end of the conversation. I'm like, okay, that was unexpected. Told my wife about it later, like, okay, I just had the strangest conversation with your father. So unbeknownst to me, at that time, Mickey had been negotiating to buy the Heat. That January, we were off on right over the New Year's, we were off on a cruise, on a Carnival cruise out in the Caribbean somewhere. 11 o'clock in the morning, having a pina colada, and Howard gets paged to the bridge, as used to happen quite often in those days. And he comes back, and he's just got this shit-eating grin on his face. And I'm like, you know, what's going on?
Is that a technical term?
That's a technical term, yeah. Like, what's going on? And he goes, well, Mickey just bought the Heat. I said, oh, that's great, congratulations. Like, I didn't remember the conversation at all. He goes, well, you told me, like, if there would be an opportunity in sports, you would move to Miami. I was like, oh, my God. So we get back, and I called Mickey and said, listen, I don't know the first thing about sports law or sports, but if you're looking for a lawyer, you know, I'd love to come work for you. And he laughed and said, I don't know the first thing about owning a sports team, and I don't know any of these people, and I just fired the general counsel. So why don't you come down and meet everybody, and we'll see where it goes. And I started 2 months later as a general counsel. 30 years old, had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Information, and he calls me over to his office, which is out by the airport in Doral, and says, you know, I got two things I need you to start working on. The first is that we really need a new arena. The old Miami arena, it's just, you know, it's not going to support the kind of revenue we need to generate to be competitive in the NBA looking forward. And the second is, you know, I think I'm about to get hit with a tampering charge by the NBA because I've been talking to Pat Riley, who was then coaching New York, and I need you to help me get out of that. So I spent my first summer in Miami trying to get Pat out of New York and trying to engage Miami-Dade County on a new arena. And I told Andre, that's when all the gray hair started to come in. It was a really exciting and interesting time, and really served as the foundation for everything we've done since. So being legal counsel was overwhelming initially, and when my predecessor left, I think I was just sitting in the right chair in 2000, and Mickey gave me the opportunity to run the business, and I've been running it ever since. I tell people all the time, I'm fortunate enough to work in the candy store of life, and sometimes it's just a job, but sometimes it's really incredible. And we program the arena as well as run the team, and I sometimes enjoy the music part of it as much as the basketball.
I'm just going to say, firstly, that's a fascinating story. Secondly, that's not a career strategy.
No.
Which is,
are you kidding me? That's the old-fashioned way. You get in through connections.
Right. Yeah. Find someone whose dad knows the owner of a sports team.
Exactly.
I don't think that's going to get everyone here
employed. You very well. It's an old story.
So, look, Eric, one of the things I admire about you, and I'm learning from you, is the idea of how do you become a business leader who also acts in the civic interest. And, you know, I think a big part of what the Heat does is, you know, really has become a recognized leader in the South Florida business community, but is well known for its community service. Like, you do a lot of work in education, social justice, environmental sustainability, youth athletics. You make a lot of donations. There's a lot of volunteerism on the part of the team. Can you say a little bit more about what's the Heat's philosophy when it comes to community engagement? And maybe give us some examples of particular things you're doing in the community which you're proud of?
So there's two elements structurally within the organization, and also just how we think about being involved in the community. One is the Miami Heat Charitable Fund, which is really about raising money and giving money out. We don't have any overhead, so every dollar we raise, we put back into the community, and we give away, roughly $3 million a year. The charitable board is Madeline Arison, who's Nikki's wife, Chris Riley, who's Pat's wife, Randy Selznick, and then Nick Arison and his wife Jenna, and me. And we make decisions based on people that are approaching us. But our mission statement is really about helping kids, particularly disadvantaged kids in this community. So most of the dollars are earmarked for the pediatric center at Jackson, to Big Brothers Big Sisters, which is a great mentoring program, to Safe Space, which is a battered women's clinic, and things like that. Like we're really very focused on kids and trying to improve their quality of life. Separate but connected, kind of, is our community relations department, which reports up through our CMO to me. And our mission is also centrally around kids. Our sort of flagship program is Heat Academy, which is, we started in 2000. We're in 3 public elementary schools in Miami-Dade County, one in Little Haiti, one in Overtown, and one in Little Havana, where we fund an after-school program for about 100 kids in each of those schools. And my staff, 35, 40 people on my staff, including me, get into the school system. And I've been teaching a 3rd grade class once a month in Little Havana for 20 years. Which, by the way, if you ever want to get
This is probably harder than running the Heat.
you want to get a first-hand view of some of the shortcomings and challenges of our public education system, get in the classroom with 3rd graders. We track those kids through Linda Cole and her efforts with the Carnival Foundation, who's our primary sponsor, through middle school, and we pick them up again in high school, those that are still in the system. And we started probably 12, 15 years ago a school to work program through Big Brothers Big Sisters, where those same kids that were in Heat Academy, the ones that are still in the system, get an opportunity to either go to Carnival or the Heat and be mentored one-on-one by one of our staffers, all through their high school experience. And then the top 15 achievers out of that group get a full ride to college every year. So we've sent roughly 350 kids to college who otherwise probably wouldn't have had a chance to do that. And those scholarships are all through Florida prepaid. They've all been funded, so we've funded the next 10 years. Like, it's already all kind of done. My favorite day every year of the Heat season is when we give those scholarships out at a game in March every year. It's usually an incredibly emotional event. A lot of those kids, it's the first time anybody in their family's gone to college. And a bunch of them now are back in the community. They've become Big Brothers or Big Sisters. They're involved, and that's been like probably the most rewarding thing that we do. But we're also pretty agile, and I think we've been very responsive to what's happened in our world. One of the things that we've done in recent vintage is, after the George Floyd murder in Minnesota, this was during the pandemic, and all of our staff meetings were over Zoom or Teams or whatever, but we got a lot of feedback from our staff, and to some extent from our players, like, what are we doing? And in thinking about the sort of universal lack of trust between some of the black communities in this country and the police forces, we spent some time trying to figure out, like, how can we get in that space and try to make it better here in Miami. And we found this guy, Quentin Williams, Q, who has an organization called Directive Community. He's a former law enforcement officer. He also actually worked in the G League, and so was attached to the NBA for a while. And he's a fascinating guy. And he does trainings for police forces. He actually works with the FBI a lot at Quantico to sort of teach how to be. That policing is not just about law and order. It's about serving the community and trying to teach the local police departments what that really means. And so we have funded a program with Q, and I think next month we actually finish training the entire Miami Police Department with D2C on how to really serve the community. And part of that effort is, like, every cop car in Miami now has a basketball in the trunk. And there's been a lot of stopping by playgrounds, gives them an entree to meet the kids, to spend some time actually serving the communities and talking about and meeting the community leaders. Those trainings are done, by the way. The community leaders are invited in, and I've sat through a few of those trainings. It gets really raw, actually, and it's fascinating and interesting. And now Miami-Dade County wants to do it, which is a much bigger police force, and will take us a lot of time. But it's been something really rewarding. Our players have gone through the training. Our staff has all gone through the training, along with the police department and the local community leaders, and it's really been a fascinating experience. So to answer your question, we do a lot of different things in the community, and we try to go where we see the greatest need.
Thank you.
It's inspiring, right? Want to talk a little bit, start to talk about the business of the Heat. So speaking of your tenure of 29 years, a lot has changed in Miami during that time, not least a 40% growth in population, and of recent vintage, those of you, especially students who are only here temporarily with us, a lot of different people immigrating to this state, especially from different states within the U.S., right? So the diversity in our state has changed to some degree. Yeah. What has the Heat had to do to sort of, number one, respond to the growth, and number two, respond to sort of the changing demographics?
So I think there's maybe two-part answer to that question. One, I think, is strategic. The other just kind of happened. And that is when I first took over the business in 2000, I remember the very first time I addressed my staff, I said, we have an opportunity in this community, and back then this was not a basketball town yet. And I said, but I think we have an opportunity in this town to differentiate ourselves from the other sports and entertainment organizations by really becoming part of our community. And part of that is I want this staff to look like South Florida. I want anybody who lives in any different community in Miami to be able to come to a game, an event, or offices for a business meeting and see somebody that looks like them, sounds like them, might have had the same experiences as them, and feel comfortable being here. So some of that is about customer service. Some of that's about diversity. And we weren't really using those terms back then. That wasn't sort of how we were thinking about it. But what's happened over time is we have the most diverse workforce, I think, in the sports and entertainment industry. Certainly in the NBA, we're about 70% minority in our full-time staff. And so as Miami has only continued to get more diverse, that has really played to our advantage with corporately, tickets, and just being part of the community as well. The second part of that is more strategic, which is we undertook a really serious data initiative so we could understand what was happening in our community and understand where people that might look and behave like our current fans were living, how they were behaving, what they were doing, how we could find them, how we could turn them on to the Heat, get them on a waiting list if they couldn't get seats. And so we've done a lot around data capture and analysis. McKinsey would be proud of us.
Well, I mean, that's a good segue into talking a little bit more about customer experience generally, because I think that Heat has really been known for the customer, the fan experience. You've really advanced things on the marketing and sales side, that you've changed the operations of the arena. So what's your view on how has the demands of the customer or the fan changed over time? And how have you met that changing need? And where do you think fan requirements and demands and the fan experience is headed? Because it's a very competitive entertainment marketplace now.
It is. I think one aspect is that the basketball fan in Miami has become much more sophisticated over time. I think as we've had success, as we've built our brand and gotten more and more people to come to games, our fans are very sophisticated in terms of what's happening on the court, what's happening elsewhere in the league. That wasn't so in the late 90s and the early 2000s. We've sort of trained a couple of generations of Heat fans, so there's been that kind of a change. But I think what you're talking about is more reflected in our community, which is while there's still, unfortunately, a very economically challenged segment of our community, there's also at the high end a a thriving, very wealthy part of our community. And so, to a large extent, our fan base has become less price sensitive and more desirous of premium experiences. And when you have a facility like ours, which is a great facility, and we put a lot of money into it, and we try to keep it current, one of the things that's really challenging is it's not very big. So we're trying to build more premium spaces. We're trying to create more opportunities for premium experiences, and I think that's where the future is headed as well. Like as more and more money pours into this town, which you've seen over the last, since the pandemic, where we've got 300,000 people from primarily New York and California that weren't here. They all want tickets, and we only have whatever it is, 120 floor seats. That's where they want to sit, right? They're wealthy, and they want, to some extent, what we don't have. So we're trying to figure out how to create more of that product, create more of those experiences, more spaces where those experiences can happen on a small footprint.
Do you think that's especially different in the NBA, or it feels like that's sweeping across all sports, all entertainment,
I think that's
whether it's
everywhere.
concerts, right?
I think it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I think you see it with F1 and the success they've had here coming into Miami. It's extremely, premium environment.
So let's talk a little bit about leadership, Future of Leadership series. Tell us about your philosophy on leadership. You've been 24 years at the helm. You've got to have learned and developed a way of thinking about it.
You give me too much credit that I have a philosophy of leadership. I think first and foremost, it has to be authentic. You can't fool people. You have to be yourself, and you have to stress the things that are important to you. We've built a culture at the Heat that's centers around treating your colleagues kind of the way you'd want to be treated, with respect, and also one that promotes getting everybody involved. I think one of the reasons that very few people ever leave the Heat is because everybody feels like they've got some ownership in the decisions we make and the things we're trying to do. If we face a new business problem, the first thing we're going to do is create a committee of people from all different levels, from different divisions in the organization, to tackle that problem, so that everyone feels like, even if they're not on that committee, they know somebody who is, and they know what's happening, and they have an opportunity to weigh in and to participate. And so, I would almost answer it in the negative. Like, I don't think leadership is telling people what to do. That doesn't work. Like, you have to have a collaborative environment where people feel like they have a stake in the outcome of the decisions that get made. And I'm very fortunate. My senior team has been together a very long time. There's a lot of trust, and they have a lot of freedom and a lot of rope to make decisions and to rely on their staffs who they have trust in. And I think that's how you build an organization that's highly functional and that is successful over time.
You make it sound like all these organizations are highly functional, but if you look across sports, there are lots of highly dysfunctional organizations.
Indeed, there are.
You can look across the pond at Premier League soccer. There's some very high-functioning teams, some poor ones. One of the things that sort of strikes me is that in your organization, leadership, well, as you said, but it's literally a team sport, that there are actually many leaders. So you have to deal with owners, Mickey and Nick Arison. You have to work effectively with the Heat president, Pat Riley. Then you've got, who of course himself has won titles as a player and a coach.
Yep.
Then you've got Eric Spoelstra, and then you've got leaders on the court. So can you say a little bit about how all that comes together into the symphony that somehow made the NBA Finals last year?
So that's an interesting thing to think about. So a lot of lessons learned along the way. I would say one of the things that really works for us now is that we've all been doing this together for a very long time.
Yeah.
And there's a level of trust that exists across all of those different folks. And we, to some extent, we all have our own lanes, which makes it a little bit easier. But it wasn't always that way. There's been some bumps in the road, and I think one of the things that all those people do well is to have open and transparent communication. And while we don't always agree, we've figured out how to disagree successfully. And by that, like, listen, in any sports organization, there's a business side and a sports side. And it should be a symbiotic relationship, but there are different goals. The sports guys, they want to win championships.
Mm-hmm.
The business side, we're trying to drive revenue, keep costs down, create and nurture a successful brand. And those things, if done well, work really well together. But it's really easy for this side to be selfish and for this side to be selfish. And I think in a lot of those dysfunctional organizations, that's what happens. I think we've had some success over the years, and I credit the Arisons for this 100%, is if there is a disagreement, it's okay, but what do we need to do for everybody to win, right? What's the solution where you get what you need and you get what you need? And I think that's the way we've communicated for a very long time now. And I give both Mickey and Nick a lot of credit for making sure that that's how things developed. But part of it is, I worked for Pat for the first 5 years that he was with us. I was his general counsel too, with all the trades, the free agent signings. I was in his strategy sessions in terms of how to build our team and our organization. So when I got this job, we already had a trust built up and a respectful relationship, and that's something that's carried through to this day.
So team sport leadership is, right? How has that changed, perhaps? I feel like we've seen a lot of shifts, not just post-pandemic, but really beginning before that, where there's more of an emphasis on work-life balance, mental health concerns, of course, the whole dynamic with remote and hybrid work that's going on right now. Has your leadership style had to change, or what have you had to do with the Heat to sort of accommodate workers' views on that?
Yeah, this is hugely generational, and we've done a lot of work internally on multi-generational workforce issues. People my age, I don't want to generalize too much, but us older folks want everybody back in the office and want to go back to the way things always were, because that worked great. But this new generation, actually 2 generations of folks coming into the workforce, the first question they ask when you interview them is, can I work remotely? And so, yeah, we've had to deal with it the same way I'm sure McKinsey has, and probably you have too in academia. And we've tried to find a balance. We're in the live events business, so you got to be there for the events, right? That's what we do. But when we're off season or when there's a break in the schedule, we have put we haven't written it down in pen, but we basically have a policy that you got to be in the office 3 days a week, which gives people an opportunity to have a little bit of a flexible lifestyle and work remotely. We have Teams and Zoom and all the things that people have elsewhere. And honestly, as much as I resisted that, it's been pretty successful. We have not seen a big fall off in productivity or effectiveness of what we've been trying to do. So at this point, I've just sort of accepted that that's the way it's going to be, and everybody seems happy with it. So that's where we are.
Good.
A little bit of kicking and screaming from me, but
Right, our generation
Right.
sort of sees the world through a different lens.
I mean, maybe your generation. I don't know about.
see, this is what I deal with all the time at work too.
So, I think one of the biggest trends in business in general is the use of and the role of technology.
Yep.
And you've already mentioned it, but there's obviously been the rise of different ways of interacting with fans through mobile. There's the use of advanced analytics, and now obviously there's a lot of conversation in every single industry about AI and Gen AI. So can you say a little bit about how the Heat thinks about technology, where you think you're headed, and are you also talking about Gen AI and what opportunities it offers?
Yeah, but I'm not the right person to answer that question. So I think, when we look back in time to the early 2000s, Ticketmaster is our ticket provider. It's still the dominant player in our industry, although it has some competition now. And I think for a very long time, our industry sort of relied on Ticketmaster to to move the ball forward from a technology perspective. But I got very frustrated that, like, when I first got the job, we didn't even know who was buying our tickets, much less who was using them. And we pushed Ticketmaster. We got to the point where, okay, now we know who's buying the tickets, but we still don't know who's actually using them, who's in our building. And around 2010 or so, I sort of threw up my hands and said, okay, we're going to solve this. So I hired a couple of really smart people. By the third time I hired that group, I finally got it right. And we were the first team that went mobile with ticketing. And it was pre-pandemic. The reason we did that was so we could follow the ticket to the ultimate user. Because from a customer service perspective, it makes no sense to keep talking to the person who bought the ticket if they're not the one that's using it. You want to be able to interface directly with the ultimate user. And it felt a little bit Big Brother-ish, but ultimately, I think, has changed the way we do business. So we now have very sophisticated fan profiles on virtually anybody who's ever bought a ticket. From us or for a concert, we know their when they come, which concession stands they eat at, how many games they come to, who they share their tickets with, which puts us in a much more powerful position to be a good customer service organization, but also for sales. Who hasn't come to a game for a while? They're the people we should be reaching out to. Things like that.
Just quickly on that, does that chain break when a ticket is sold on the secondary market?
No.
So you still are able to track who the...
Correct. And actually, the next step, which we are not going to figure out, but somebody will, is how to control the secondary market. Like right now, the Ticketmaster secondary market is the dominant one, but StubHub still has some market share. And at some point, through blockchain or otherwise, we're going to be able to cut the StubHubs of the world off and control the entire environment. Hasn't happened yet, but it's coming.
Well, and presumably have some of that revenue.
Yeah. So as we were gathering all this data, it occurred to us, that there was so much more we could be doing now with analytics, because now we know we have so much information, and so we created our own sort of sister company, 601 Analytics. The first big win, by the way, was Miami fans get a hard time for showing up late. So we always knew our fans kind of showed up a little late, but we didn't know exactly what that meant. And so now we know exactly when people are coming in through what gates, and we started staggering the start times of our part-time employees to better reflect when they were actually needed at their posts. We saved $1 million in the first year, and every year since. So it's that kind of thinking that has sort of earned us this reputation that you referenced earlier as innovative and technology-driven in our industry. And 601 Analytics, in addition to handling our own stuff, now has been hired by the Milwaukee Bucks, the NBA itself, Illich Sports, which is the Detroit Tigers and Red Wings, the New Orleans Pelicans and Saints, the Los Angeles Clippers. We're about to sign a contract with the Lakers, so we are now working for a bunch of our brethren, helping them figure out how to do all the things that we already know how to do. And for us, that is the next phase. Like, we are building a business now that at some point we will either sell or it'll become so successful we will need to sell.
So what kind of advice would you give, the room full of future business leaders in terms of, number one, their careers in business, but also getting involved in the community, since that's so much at the heart of what the Heat does?
Listen, getting involved in the community, I think is good business. I think the other businesses in town recognize it. I think it puts you in a leadership position that others come to you for advice about, want to emulate, want to be more involved. So, and just in my personal life, I was on the board at Big Brothers Big Sisters for 20 years, been involved at Miami Children's Hospital and otherwise, and I find it rewarding. And I would encourage anybody who wants to be a business leader that it's a great way to meet people, to network, in addition to doing good in your community. And I think it's important for everybody to want to do good. It's just spiritually rewarding. In terms of advice, like you know, it's been a long time since I've looked for a job, right? Like I'm 58 years old, and you know, the last time I looked for a job, I was 30. So, but I think that the world has changed. There are so many avenues. My kids are 26 and 22, so they're in this world between LinkedIn and the opportunities that exist and through social media and on the internet. It's a much bigger world than it was when I was younger and looking for jobs, you know, in a very specific way. And I think it probably is, in a way, kind of fun to go out and see what's really out there. And I would encourage people to broaden their horizons in terms of what those opportunities might be, and stretch to something that, you know, looks real, even though if you don't know a lot about it, it looks really interesting. Your qualifications with an MBA, I mean, you know, the world is your oyster.
What about skill sets? Anything specific?
Okay, so this is a pet peeve. Going back to my days at the law firm. So at the last law firm I worked at before I took the job with the Heat, I got myself onto the hiring committee. I wasn't a partner. I was a relatively senior associate, and I got into this knockdown, drag-out fight with a bunch of the partners who only wanted to hire kids that were, you know, top 10 in their class at Harvard or Yale or whatever. And I was like, those guys are just sitting in the library, like, you know, creating memos for you. What you really want is people your clients want to do business with, like the top, you know, 25% at Case Western, or you know, somebody you want to have a beer with. Like, go find somebody with a personality, right? Like that was always my and they were worried about their, you know, their status, and I was worried about, you know, getting the work done and pleasing the clients. And I've taken that with me definitely through the Heat. I mean, we pride ourselves on hiring good people, and you don't have to have the absolute best credentials to get a job at the Heat. What you have to have is great interpersonal skills. We're a customer-based organization, and you have to be able to interface with customers and make them laugh and make them happy, and you know, that's what I look for.
Great.
All right, we're going to go to the audience for some questions now, so maybe we could get the mic ready. But just one observation about your last job search. I'd love to hear that story told from your wife's side, because I have a feeling that there was some collusion between her and her dad.
Actually, no. Interestingly, she had just been hired. She was a real lawyer. Like she was a federal prosecutor. She had just been hired by Eric Holder, actually, who was the U.S. attorney in D.C. at the time. And she made a 3-year commitment, and she was 6 months into her 3-year commitment when this happened. So she had to go in sheepishly to Eric Holder and say, my husband just got a job in Miami. And I knew Eric a little bit, and he's like, oh my God, Eric got a chance to work with the Heat. That's awesome, you know. So you know, he gave me a big hug, and he helped her transfer to the office down here to work for Kendall Coffee. So she was actually
amazing.
Yeah, it was.
All right, does anyone have a question? Maybe start here.
The mic's moving on. So we have a mic.
Just, you talked about leadership. I'm curious about similarities and/or differences, sports side versus the non-sports side. How do you see it?
Yeah, no, there's I would say the sports side is very much command and control, but it's smaller. It's 40 people, 45 people, players, coaches, you know, trainers, scouts. That's it. Like I've got 300 people. That would never work for me. It's a much more collaborative, democratic kind of place than the sports side. Sports side is very directed, and the mission is much simpler. So.
I think you had a question over here. Yeah. And do you want to introduce yourself as you ask the question as well?
Yeah, of course. Hello, good morning. Thank you for coming to speak with us. I am Lisa Gordon. I'm an MBA in real estate candidate here, and I also am an Arena Talent Experience intern with the Heat Group as well.
There you go.
So I've only been working for about 3 weeks with the team, but during my time there, I've seen how lively and collaborative the work environment is there. So I would like to know, from your perspective, what is like the leadership style that either you use or do you instill into your employees to continue to drive that environment?
First of all, thank you for confirming that I'm not a liar.
That could have been tricky.
No, listen, I think that sports and entertainment is the candy store of life, right? So we don't take ourselves so seriously. It's still a business. You know, we're trying to drive results, but we're trying to make sure that everybody has a good experience and has fun and is trained to advance with us or somewhere else. And we spend a lot of resources actually training our staff, because it's when people don't leave, it's hard to get promoted, right? If there's not a so we're always but we're trying always to develop our people so they're ready when that opportunity comes. And I think it's just I don't want to say it's warm and fuzzy because that's probably not quite right, but we do try to make it a warm and welcoming place, and I hope you've experienced that.
Anybody else? Maybe here, and then in the back afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. My name is Phil Russomano. I'm a first-year MBA here at Miami Herbert. And my question is that we all have heard of heat culture from the sports side.
Yep.
From your perspective on the business side, do you use that as a framework for what you look to accomplish, or do you take different parts of that going forward into what you want to accomplish?
No, we absolutely do. It's not quite as cutthroat as the you know, the saying that you'll see on the basketball side, but it is about excellence and create. You know, the NBA itself does a really good job of being transparent with its metrics, sales metrics, engagement metrics across all 30 teams. And if we're not in the top three or four of every metric we'd want to be in the top 3 or 4, something's wrong. Like we strive to be the best, and I think are recognized as pretty consistently the best. So I think, you know, our mission around sustained excellence, that's why warm and fuzzy doesn't quite work, because we are striving to be the best. Warm, yes. Fuzzy, maybe not so much so. And there is a real sense of accomplishment when we do that.
Great. Good morning. My name is Carl Bay, retired. I'm probably the oldest guy in the room, so I'll take it easy on you. On the subject of economic disparity,
Yeah.
could you share what the committee discussions are like when those committees get together and they address the corporate responsibility for local economic benefit and the disparity that surrounds that whole issue?
Listen, it's complicated, and I think, you know, we want to be part of the solution, and we've looked for ways to help be part of that solution. We also recognize we certainly can't do it ourselves. So it's a lot. We work very closely with Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and we look for other partners in the space. We work with Chapman, you know, in the homeless space, and some of that's financial, but a lot of that is you know, rolling up our sleeves and actually getting involved, and that's who we try to be.
I think there was a young lady in the back here.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Mr. Worth, Mr. Perez, and Ms. Dua. My name's Dan. I'm a Master of Accounting student here. My question will be, what's the most fun part of working for HEAT? And name 3.
Well, winning championships is fun. I'm not sure I should even tell you this, but I have a high school classmate who's a good friend by the name of Trey Anastasio, who's the lead guitarist for a band called Fish, which has been a hugely successful touring act for a long time, and they've come and played the arena. I think they've played 12 shows over 3 different New Year's runs, and that's about as good as it gets when you meet an old friend at the sort of the pinnacle of your industry. And honestly, I enjoy the people I work with more than anything. They're colleagues, but they're also friends, and I have a lot of respect for all of them. And you know, we've done it together for a long time. I mean, my CFO, you know, was an original HEAT employee from 1988, actually 87. So he helped get the team going. My chief marketing officer started the year after I did. I found my chief legal officer to replace me in 2000. You know, we've all worked together for a very long time, and it's a really collaborative, awesome situation.
Maybe up here.
Good morning, and thank you again. My name's Liam Willerup. I'm the vice president of our sports business club on campus. I'd love to ask, coming out of the NBA bubble, a very successful one for the Heat. Honestly, didn't end up hosting the trophy, but made a great run to the playoffs, into the finals. How much of a strategy change was it coming out of the bubble, being able to reset without fans and everything before coming back to the arena? What were some strategy changes look like there?
It was a really, really challenging time. First of all, the bubble itself was the weirdest thing you could ever imagine. I was up there for the last two series. And first of all, you're getting tested every day, which is just bizarre. And you go to the games, and there were these platforms. And so the ownership and management, there were 8 seats or something. That was all a team could bring. So we had a platform, and whoever we were playing had a platform on the other side of the arena, and there were no other fans. It was the weirdest. You can't imagine how weird that is. And it was great for TV, but to be in the arena. Anyway, to your question, it was about trying to make sure everything was safe, and 2, communicating what we were doing to make it safe, so that people would feel safe coming back, was really, that's what we were spending all of our time on. There weren't major strategy changes in terms of the direction of the business. We were just trying to get back to where we were, and so all the strategy discussions were really about that. It was, and we talked. The NBA, hired some of the greatest doctors, in the world, and we were talking to them on a regular basis. They were way more conservative than we wanted them to be, but some of them, what they said was right. And so we tried to create incentives for people to get vaccinated by creating vaccine sections, which our governor, in all his wisdom, then made us the poster child for bad businesses. It was just such a weird time. But the answer is we just really tried to make people feel comfortable coming back.
I think you had a question here.
Yeah, I had a question. I want to thank you
No,
guys
just-
again. My name is Lorena Lorenzo. I'm completing my MSBA in business analytics, and I want to get into sports analytics. And I wanted to ask, you had the profile and you talk about fan engagements, and you have that covered through analytics. But I wanted to know what you guys are trying to do in the global aspect of things and looking into fan engagement globally and the outreach of that.
So the global stuff is complicated for teams. The NBA itself controls most of the international marketing rights. Teams have historically been pretty limited in what we can do, although it's starting to change. They're starting to let us do a little bit more. So some international marketing partnerships are available. We've done a few. American Airlines is one that stands out, where we do things with them all over the world. But the big thing for us internationally is retail. We just actually released our new City Edition uniform last night, and we sell, you wouldn't believe how much stuff we sell online to Australia and the Philippines and Europe. And that's really where we've concentrated most of our international efforts.
Maybe over here. And then after that, one more question. Is that all right, Eric?
Sure.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Jessica. I'm second year MBA student. My question is more around leadership. So from generation to generation and from different position to position, how do you see yourself, adapt yourself to leadership style to more modified to generation difference, and from position, how do you adapt that change?
I'm laughing. So basically, I'm nicer than I used to be. It's really interesting. Like the people who came before me and the people who are more or less my age, like they don't need a lot of reinforcement. Right? They know what they're supposed to do, and they go and they put their head down and they do it. And some of these younger generations that are coming, they need to be told how great they are,
Thank
what
you.
a good job they're doing. And, and I think that's a fact, by the way. It's like, you can read any number of articles about this stuff, and I've seen it play out in real time. So I make a little joke that I'm a little nicer, but I am like more purposefully communicative about what we're doing well as an organization, we've started giving out awards to people that are, having particularly great, quarters or whatever, and certainly different than it used to be.
And just in the middle here, yes.
That's great advice, by the way, Eric.
Yeah.
Be nicer.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Matthew Sussman, full-time MBA student in my first year. Thank you very much for your insights and your time. How do you balance driving revenue, giving premium client experience, and making the game and the team accessible to the community as a whole?
Yeah, so that is a great question. And I would say our philosophy has always been not to be so, how do I say this? Okay, so there are teams in our league and in other leagues who go on a successful run from the sports side and immediately jack their prices and take advantage. We've tried never to do that. And I think one of the reasons that our fan base has been so loyal, we are renewing 90% plus of our season tickets and premium seats every year for the last 15 years. One of the reasons we've been so successful in renewing is because we haven't been, so aggressive with pricing. Having said that, at some point you start to get left behind because your peer group is doing that, and in order to compete, you have to get your prices up. And so we have those discussions literally every day. And how do you create a situation where that's still affordable for a family of 4 or 8 that want to come to a game versus servicing the premium clientele, and it's not unlike what happens in Washington, where people have different opinions about how we should be doing that strategically. I think where we've started to go is we're raising the prices of the more premium tickets at a higher rate and trying to keep the more affordable tickets affordable.
Maybe just to end, who are the leaders in sports who you admire? Who do you think are the great leaders in other sports outside of the Heat?
So, well.
In any sport.
Yeah, so that's a hard question for me to answer. First of all, I have a lot of respect for our commissioner, Adam Silver, who I think is an old friend, but has also done a really great job. Part of the problem with that question is I know all these people too well, right? There are some other owners besides Mickey that I think are really great. Clay Bennett in Oklahoma City is awesome. He comes to mind. Sports world is interesting, and in the old days when I first got involved with the Heat, I remember the first Board of Governors meeting I went to in 1995 or 1996, looking around the room and not being as impressed as I thought I would be or I thought I should be. That has all changed. Like the new generation of owners, these guys are all just incredibly smart and accomplished, and yet, to a man or woman, they all come in and think because they've been so successful in their other walks of life, they're going to figure it out and create a better mousetrap, and it doesn't really work like that. So it's the people that have been, there was a guy named Rick Welts who was at the NBA for a long time. He invented the All-Star game when he was the CMO at the league, and he went on to run the Suns and then the Golden State Warriors, and he just retired about 1.5 years ago. He's a guy I admire quite a bit, but it comes and goes.
Maybe that's a good point to stop. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all for having me.
Fantastic.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for installments of this Future of Leadership series, co-sponsored with the Miami office of the McKinsey Group.